Herzlich willkommen zu KLAK, Kronberger literarischer Adventskalender 2022. Von Jugendlichen für ihre Stadt und ihre Mitmenschen, Hoffnung in der Dunkelheit, mit Geschichten und Gedichten, die Jugendliche an Weihnachten erinnern oder an die Idee von Weihnachten. Jeden Tag eine neue Geschichte und los geht's.
Hallo, mein Name ist Ida, ich bin 18 Jahre alt und ich werde euch jetzt aus 2 Harry Potter Büchern vorlesen. In der Harry Potter Welt sind die Weihnachtsszenen immer die allerschönsten Szenen und ja, jetzt erstmal aus The Chamber of Secrets. At last the term ended and a silence deep as the snow on the grounds descended on the castle. Harry found it peaceful rather than gloomy, and enjoyed the fact that he, Hermione, and the Weasleys had the run of Gryffindor Tower, which meant they could play Exploding Snap loudly without bothering anyone, and practice duelling in private. Fred, George, and Ginny had chosen to stay at the school, rather than visit Bill in Egypt with Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Percy, who disapproved of what he termed their childish behaviour, didn't spend much time in the Gryffindor common room. He had already told them, pompously, that he was only staying over Christmas because it was his duty as a prefect to support the teachers during this troubled time. Christmas morning dawned, cold and white. Harry and Ron, the only ones left in their dormitory, were woken very early by Hermione, who burst in, fully dressed and carrying presents for them both. "Wake up," she said loudly, pulling back the curtains at the window. "Hermione, you're not supposed to be in here," said Ron, shielding his eyes against the light. "Merry Christmas to you too," said Hermione, throwing him his present. "I've been up for nearly an hour, adding more lace wings to the potion. It's ready." Harry sat up, suddenly awake. "Are you sure?" "Positive," said Hermione, shifting Scabbers the rat so that she could sit down on the end of his four-poster. "If we're going to do it, I say it should be tonight." At that moment, Hedwig swooped into the room, carrying a very small package in her beak. "Hello," said Harry happily, as she landed on his bed. "Are you speaking to me again?" She nibbled his ear in an affectionate sort of way, which was a far better present than the one which she had brought him, which turned out to be from the Dursleys. They had sent Harry a toothpick and a note telling him to find out whether he'd be able to stay at Hogwarts over the summer holidays too. The rest of Harry's Christmas presents were far more satisfactory. Hagrid had sent him a large tin of treacle fudge, which Harry decided to soften by the fire before eating. Ron had given him a book called The Flying with the Cannons, a book of interesting facts about his favourite Quidditch team, and Hermione had bought him a luxury eagle feather quill. Harry opened the last presents to find a new hand-knitted jumper from Mrs. Weasley and a large plum cake. He put up her card with a fresh surge of guilt, thinking about Mr. Weasley's car, which he hadn't seen since its crash with the Whomping Willow, and the bout of rule-breaking he and Ron were planning next. No one, not even someone dreading taking Polyjuice potion later, could fail to enjoy Christmas dinner at Hogwarts. The Great Hall looked magnificent. Not only were there a dozen frost-covered Christmas trees and thick streamers of holly and mistletoe crisscrossing the ceiling, but enchanted snow was falling, warm and dry, from the ceiling. Dumbledore led them in a few of his favourite carols, Hagrid booming more and more loudly with every goblet of eggnog he consumed. Percy, who hadn't noticed that Fred had bewitched his prefect badge so that it now read Pinhead, kept asking them all why they were sniggering at. Harry didn't even care that Draco Malfoy was making loud and snide remarks about his new jumper from the Slytherin table. With a bit of luck, Malfoy would be getting his Comeuppance in a few hours. So, das war jetzt aus dem zweiten Buch. Jetzt werde ich aus dem dritten Buch lesen. Die sind gerade bei Hagrid gewesen und wollen ihm gerade helfen, sein Buckbeak zu retten. The trip to Hagrid's, though far from fun, had nevertheless had the effect Ron and Hermione had hoped. Though Harry had by no means forgotten about Black, He couldn't brood constantly on revenge if he wanted to help Hagrid win his case against the Committee of the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. He, Ron, and Hermione went to the library the next day and returned to the empty common room laden with books, which might help prepare a defence for Buckbeak. The three of them sat in front of the roaring fire, slowly turning the pages of dusty volumes about famous cases of marauding beasts, speaking occasionally when they ran across something relevant. Here's something. There was a case in 1722. But the hippogriff was convicted. Ugh, look what they did to it. That's disgusting. This might help. Look, Manticore savaged someone in 1296, and they let the Manticore off. Oh, no. That was only because everyone was too scared to go near it. Meanwhile, in the rest of the castle, the usual magnificent Christmas decorations had been put up, despite the fact that hardly any of the students remained to enjoy them. Thick streamers of holly and mistletoe were strung along the corridors. Mysterious lights shone from inside every suit of armour, and the great hall was filled with its usual 12 Christmas trees, glittering with golden stars. A powerful and delicious smell of cooking paraded the corridors, and by Christmas Eve it had grown so strong that even Scabbers poked his nose out of the shelters of Ron's pocket to sniff hopefully at the air. On Christmas morning, Harry was woken by Ron throwing his pillow at him. "Oh, presents!" Harry reached for his glasses and put them on, squinting through the semi-darkness to the foot of his bed, where a small heap of parcels had appeared. Ron was already ripping the paper of his own presents. "Oh, another jumper from Mum. Maroon again. See if you've got one." Harry had. Mrs. Weasley had sent him a scarlet jumper with a Gryffindor lion knitted on the front. Also a dozen of home-baked mince pies, some Christmas cake, and a box of nut brittle. As he moved all these things aside, he saw a long, thin package lying underneath. "What's that?" said Ron, looking over a freshly unwrapped pair of maroon socks in his hand. "Dunno." Harry ripped the parcel open and gasped as a magnificent, gleaming broomstick rolled out onto his bedspread. Ron dropped his socks and jumped off his bed for a closer look. "I don't believe it," he said hoarsely. It was a firebolt. Identical to the dream broom Harry had gone to see every day in Diagon Alley. Its handle glittered as he picked it up. He could feel it vibrating and let go. It hung in midair, unsupported, at exactly the right height for him to mount it. His eyes moved from the golden registration number at the top of the handle right down to the perfectly smooth, streamlined birch twigs that made up the tail.